What if betrayal trauma isn't actually what you think it is? And what if the reason that you still feel stuck isn't because you're broken, but because your brain never got the chance to process what happened? Welcome to Accelerated Hypnotherapy. I'm Liana West, a Betrayal Trauma Recovery Specialist. And in this video, I'm breaking down the difference between betrayal and betrayal trauma. If you've ever felt like your body is still holding on to something that your mind can't fully explain, you feel stuck or triggered as fuck, this will help you see why. Not all betrayal is traumatic. Betrayal is when there's been a violation of trust by someone that you relied on or just expected better of. And it can be things like a friend who you told something in confidence, or when you found out that your partner told you a white lie about something small. It can happen at work where things might be unfair and there's a sense of being affected emotionally by intentional or unintentional things that someone should have or shouldn't have done. But not every betrayal has the impact of trauma, because it might be a toxic workplace, but you've learned the signs, you don't trust nobody, and you've just learned to deal. That's betrayal. But when you don't have the resources to deal with the experience, it can become overwhelming. If you don't have that resilience to handle what's happened, that's when betrayal becomes traumatic. And if you've been able to put the experience into the past and you felt that sense of completion, that you've resolved things, that's betrayal. But if you feel like you're still stuck in the past, your mind is still in it, and there's been long-term psychological harm, this is where betrayal becomes betrayal trauma. And your brain starts to become overwhelmed. Like when you're a child, trauma can be created when someone that you trust for survival, like a parent or a caregiver, or if you have a partner that you depend on, especially if you're financially dependent on them, or you depend on them for emotional support, for safety or well-being, and that trust has been violated. So it could have been infidelity or a big deception in a relationship. And that dependence on the other person is what causes the trust. That dependence creates the trust. And that's what causes the significant psychological harm when they betray you. So it can be things like child abuse, infidelity, or ongoing deception by a partner. And it can also happen in the workplace where the institute or the organization isn't keeping their employees or their members safe in a way that's a violation of their safety. And so the trauma is really about the relationship that you have with the person who's betrayed you. Betrayal isn't about a stranger or some random event, but it actually comes from someone that you relied on for safety. And that betrayal creates deep wounds that don't heal easily. And it's overwhelming to your entire system, and you don't feel safe. And if it's left unchecked, you might start to develop symptoms of PTSD, like hyperactivity in the emotional part of your brain, hypersensitivity, where you are always triggered as fuck, and hypervigilance, where you're on edge, you're jumpy, you startle easy. It's like you're walking on eggshells, wondering when the other shoe will drop. And you might even feel bad when you feel happy or joy, or when you catch yourself smiling because you're afraid that something bad is going to happen if you do. You might be having flashbacks, intrusive thoughts that lead to rumination, and intense bad feelings in your body that keep you feeling stuck. And you cannot get past what's happened because your brain is actually stuck. Because every time your brain goes to process the experience and tries to put it into the past, tries to put the story in the past tense and create a memory of it, it gets so overwhelmed by the experience that It stays in the present tense, like it's happening right now. So you will keep experiencing flashbacks and those bad feelings that you had on D-Day when you discovered your husband was cheating and that you were betrayed. The difference between betrayal and betrayal trauma is that there's that dependence on the person who betrayed you. And there's often a power imbalance, like a parent or a boss, or it could be a husband who controls the finances and is tripping. If you're in a situation where you're also financially dependent, like a child who can't leave, and you feel trapped in the betrayal both emotionally and physically. And betrayal trauma involves that high level of dependence. So it's that financial dependence, the emotional dependence, where your safety or survival depends on someone else in a way that their betrayal becomes traumatic. And if it's persistent, as opposed to something random, like an accident, but because of the severity and because this betrayal went on for so long, it starts to become complex. And when it happens for a while, a trauma bond can start to develop. Betrayal trauma affects trust, attachment, because it creates uncertainty about the future and future events. And the reason that you feel stuck is because trauma affects the way your brain is able, or actually not able, to process this memory, to put this experience into memory, to put it into the past. And there might be an element of dissociation as an adaptive response to deal with what's happening, especially when it's ongoing, when it's something that keeps repeating. Your brain is responding very differently to trauma than to fear-based traumas or life-threatening trauma, because betrayal is relational. So it affects your sense of safety, of reality, and then it starts to snowball, and it affects your ability to trust yourself and to trust other people. Because betrayal trauma almost always affects the way you relate to others. It's complex, and time does not heal all wounds, because it usually starts to snowball rather than just causing temporary distress. Because not all betrayals are equal. They start to affect other areas of your life. You're not able to enjoy hobbies or things that you used to enjoy. You're not interested in being with your friends. And one of the symptoms of trauma that I see is that it starts to affect your work, and it starts to affect your income and your money. Betrayal trauma is affected by your level of dependence, that severity of the violation, and it really has everything to do with how it occurs to you, the person who's experiencing it, and your ability to handle what's happened or what's still happening, like maybe at work or in a relationship. It's like your brain catches on fire on D-Day in that emotional part of the brain called the amygdala. And that's the difference between infidelity, an event that's created by your partner, versus trauma, that overwhelming experience, and even more complex trauma from repeated deception, because you can't escape the situation. So not all betrayal is traumatic. It becomes traumatic betrayal when the violation comes from someone you depended on for love, safety, support, or survival, and you can't escape, like at work or if you're financially dependent. You're hypersensitive, the emotional part of your brain is hyperactive, and you're hypervigilant and triggered and unable to trust yourself or others, especially when the betrayal is repeated and has a power imbalance, like when you have a toxic boss who's like a walking red flag with a corner office, and you feel stuck because your brain is overwhelmed and it's unable to process the experience. It's unable to put it into the past. And this is why you're unable to move on. Time does not heal all wounds. And if you need clarity on how to move forward, I'll put a link in the description. Like and subscribe. Put a heart emoji in the comments if you want to learn more about trauma bonding. And let's connect on the next one.